Hi, I'm Gail Hoag, and I'm here today with my husband Gregory. There's been a lot going on in the news these days that personally I found to be rather disturbing. Last night we were watching news, and there are the stories that are going on about the immigrants and the separation of children from their families, and it was just highly distressing. And what question is coming up right now, because in the news there's also so much about something they call fake news, is the determination of what is real and what is fake. And sometimes it's very, very difficult to determine what is what. And so Greg and I started to have some conversations about that so that we could share with you what we believe is a better take on how to determine what is more in line with truth. And I'm going to make the distinction that that's not a capital T. It's truth from a perspective of where we're at in the moment, because everything is constantly changing. And we live in a universe where everything is always moving. And where we are in relationship to everything else determines how we see things, how we respond, and what we choose to create. So it's very interesting to take this into depth and look at how can we choose to respond not from just a place of what we're feeling in the moment, what works with our survival instincts. Instead, what we know from a higher level of who we are. So that really means that we're asking ourselves to take that breath, to come back into the center, and to look at what we can see from a higher realm, from the eagle view of greater perspective.
It's so important to maybe go over this a few times, this sense of relativity, because we're multidimensional beings. But in this dimension, the third dimension, as Gail said, truth doesn't exist with a capital T. It's always relative. It's relative to my understanding, relative to what I need, relative to who I am and my life path. And so it is for all of us. So this whole thing about fake news, what is fake to one person is true to another. And so it switches back and forth between one thing and another for all of us. But this gets to be very confusing. This gets to be a very painful situation. We don't want to throw it all up into the air and say, okay, there's nothing I can do. It's all fake anyway. But what we really need to do is come back always to the center, the core of our being. If there's any place that's stable in our lives, it's that core part of our being, that part that is through our heart center and aligns us with higher self. And higher self is much more than this physical personality. And what I mean by that is it's takes into the fourth dimension, fifth, sixth, higher dimensional perspectives, which are more inclusive of this reality. So if we want to find out what's going on here in our lives, we have to start looking at things from the bigger part of ourselves, because the little part is always going to get so personally involved. I remember once saying that's one of the problems of being a human being. We get so involved in this character, we take ourselves much too personally. And if you move to a higher level of understanding, if you're able to move to a place where you can look down at yourself and see what's motivating you, what's driving you, what is affecting you in your life, then perhaps you can have a clearer understanding of the fake news that's going on. It's always going to be fake to someone, but the point again is, how is it affecting you, and how are you going to work with it? How do you discern what to go to next in your life?
It really is interesting. I was thinking also about how all life is wired with purpose, whether it's in the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, here as a human being. Everything seems to be somehow connected into purpose. In the animal kingdom with animal instincts, there's so much that's directed by survival. Well, we take that on here as well as human beings. However, when we can raise to that next level of who we are, so that we start looking at purpose in terms of how do we express love? How do we bring higher consciousness into our lives, into our communities, onto the planet? Then we're dealing with a whole different level of opportunities. We've we're very creative beings. We are totally creative beings. And yet the way that we've been raised, much of that creativity has been sort of, you know, um, stamped out of us. And unfortunately, when the creativity is lessened or deadened in the human being, then they become followers. They become individuals that are just capable of doing what they're told or responding in ways that maybe higher powers want them to respond. So, unfortunately, our educational system has tended to take that creativity and make it something that's harder to get to. So when we get back to looking at bringing creativity, recognizing that our being is here from that creative and dynamic level, then our choices shift. It means that what we're being told is not necessarily what we're here to follow. We are capable of analyzing, of having a sense of using our intuition, our higher values, our morals, our ethics, and our higher purpose be more of the deciding factor than what somebody else says or what the so-called law seems to dictate. And so that takes us to a place of then being able to say, if my higher purpose is about bringing more love into my life and the lives of others, if my higher purpose is about greater compassion and caring and service for the good of all, then I will begin to read all of the events that I see around me in a very different way, where I want to be inclusive, as Gregory was saying, of the higher dimensions, the higher capabilities of who I am as a human being.